Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Arunima Sarin. I recently graduated with a PhD in psychology from Harvard University, and I'm very excited to help you with your academic journey. Today I'll be talking about a key aspect of the PhD application process. That is, PhD interviews. If you've been invited to one, well done. Congratulations. It's a big step. Being invited to a PhD interview already signals that the program and the department that you applied for is interested in you and thinks that you are a promising candidate. So great job. I've been on both sides of the interview process. I've given several interviews as a prospective candidate, and I've also been on the other side evaluating other candidates. Based on my experiences from both sides of the aisle and the insights I have learned, I'll be talking about some things that you can do to prepare for your PhD interviews. Specifically, I'll share 6 key tips. Let's get started. Now, my first tip is to understand the format of your PhD interview. PhD interviews come in all kinds of format. So you could be meeting with a panel of faculty members or with different faculty members one-on-one. Your interviews could be in person and last a day long, or they could be virtual. If you're interested in understanding the structure of PhD interviews, take a look at this earlier video I made where I talk about the structure of PhD interviews, but also the big guiding philosophy behind them. Regardless of the type of interview you're going to be faced with, make sure that you know exactly what it is. If it's a panel, figure out who's going to be on your panel. If it's virtual, make sure you test all the technology involved. The goal here is to prepare so that you know exactly what to expect and you have the logistics down so that on the day of the interview, you can focus on what really matters, and that's the content of what you want to say. My second tip is to fully be prepared and understand the structure of the PhD program you have applied to and the department you have applied to. Now, different PhD programs are structured very differently based on the country, but even based on different universities. For instance, in some PhD programs, when you start the program, you have to already commit to one particular lab. At other universities, they have a period where for the first year or two, you rotate between different labs before you commit to one. So whatever structure your chosen program or department has, make sure that you are familiar with it. And this is for several key reasons. First, you should be familiar with what it is that you have applied for. If you're not, you're going to seem unprepared, right, and ill-informed. So it makes sure that you are prepared and you seem prepared. Second, it makes you seem enthusiastic and interested in the department and the way that things work there. And the most important reason is that it will help you tailor your responses to their questions by aligning your research with research already taking place in the department. All of these 3 will go a long way in making you seem more prepared and genuinely interested in their particular program and their faculty. So it will all work in your favor. So make sure you understand the structure of the program you're applying to and are familiar with the broad themes of research that take place in the department. My third tip is to have a little blurb prepared about yourself. Now, most PhD interviews will start with the interviewer or panel of interviewers asking the candidate to tell them a little bit about themselves. In an ideal world, right, ideally, we wouldn't have to write a blurb to tell someone about ourselves. It should be something that we should just be able to do. However, I have noticed that because of the constraints of the situation, right, it is an evaluative context and people are often nervous. Sometimes when you ask candidates to tell you a little bit about themselves, they start to ramble. And what that rambling does is it often throws them off for the rest of the PhD interview. And so I strongly recommend preparing a little blurb that will help you get through the first couple minutes of the interview. Now, this blurb should not be super detailed. So I'm not saying write a whole paragraph about who you are and what you stand for and what your journey is and memorize it start to end. please don't do that. You're going to seem really stiff and artificial. What you want to ideally do is write down a few key bullet points, and then just practice them saying out loud. Just talk about those bullet points and practice it enough till it becomes really effortless and natural. The value of those bullet points is that they work as anchors in your brain, so that on the day off when you are talking about yourself, even if you end up rambling a little bit, one of those bullet points is going to work as an anchor and pull you back to the main point. And the more you practice saying those points out loud, the more effortless and natural they'll become. And this will also help because it's a really good, easy way to get yourself started. You start by feeling confident and ready, as opposed to feeling a little bit scatterbrained or rambly. So I recommend preparing a little blurb about yourself. My fourth tip is to prepare a little blurb about any past research experience you have had. It is almost certain that they are going to ask you about past research experience. Now, it might be something that you have already mentioned in one of your application documents. It might be something mentioned in your resume or CV. If you haven't mentioned anything, they might just still ask you on the spot, do you have any prior research experience? So I would definitely make sure that you are prepared to talk about it. Now, the research experience can be anything. It can be a lab manager position you had, a research assistant position you had, some kind of research paper or research project you wrote about while you were still at university. So it can just be a theoretical thing as well. Whatever it is, be sure to talk about it. When they ask you any question about your past research, I would view that as an opportunity to tell them where you've been, what kinds of skill and knowledge you have learned, and how those things have set you up to be exactly where you are right now. So use your prior experience to show that the natural next step, the natural progression for you is this PhD program, ideally with these people in their department. If you have lots of different research experience mentioned in your CV, resume, and some of your application documents, then maybe pick a few key projects where you played a pivotal role and talk about them. Talk about the big picture questions that the project addressed, but be sure to emphasize the role you played. Talk about your duties and how those progressed the project. Remember, your goal at this point is to be really clear about what the project was about and what you did, but you want to talk about it in a way that conveys your passion for science and for research and for the work you did. My next tip would be to have a little blurb, a little pitch prepared for the research that you intend to do. Now, this is the most important part of your PhD interview, where they ask you specifically about the research that you have proposed. And this is your opportunity to paint them the most vivid and compelling picture of the research that you want to do, not just in the next 5 to 6 years that you are in their department, but even for the next 10, 15 years. Bear in mind, everyone knows that, when candidates apply, their PhD interests evolve and change. So the point of this is not to tie you to the mast and say, well, this is what you said and this is what you have to do, but really rather, given that these are your research interests, tell us how you think about them. So it's really important that you are prepared with your research pitch. Now, it's quite likely that the people interviewing you would have read your application materials, so they would already be familiar with the things you wrote in those documents about the research you want to do. And so at this point, you don't want to just state the research you want to do. Rather, you want to use this as an opportunity to weave a narrative between the work you've done in the past, the knowledge you've gained, the skills you've gained, and how that naturally leads you to want to ask the questions that you want to ask, right? Discuss the questions you want to ask, but also be ready to comment on how they impact the broader literature and the intellectual landscape. Because your committee would have read your research questions before, they will also use this as an opportunity to dig deeper, ask you more detailed questions about the methodology, potentially about existing theories, how your work impacts them or how your work is informed by them. So be ready to talk about the details of your work and engage with the broader literature that might be at play. It's also a good time to informally demonstrate your grasp of the literature that surrounds the work that you're interested in, because sometimes you don't have enough space in your application materials to cover it. So be prepared with your research pitch, but also be familiar with the other literature surrounding the work you want to do. My final tip is to have a set of questions ready to ask your interviewer or panel of interviewers. Now, most PhD interviews will end with the interviewer or the panel asking the candidate, "Do you have any questions for us?" And it's always, always, always a good idea to have some questions. Terrible idea to stare at them blankly or say, "Nope." It's a good idea to have questions because it makes you seem eager and interested and thoughtful, right? It signals that you are keen to do a PhD within their department and with their faculty. It makes you seem excited and interested. So have a few questions ready. It can, the questions can be anything. They can be something really specific about the research curriculum or the way the PhD is structured. Or it can be something very general, like opportunities available for applied research, some kind of community research involvement, potential for collaboration, anything, mentorship, but have some questions ready. It's quite likely, it's possible that while you are engaging with them, you might have questions come up organically, which is great. Go with them, but have at least 2 to 3 questions ready in case nothing pops into mind at the moment. You can always fall back on the questions that you prepared before ahead of time. Now, in addition to these 6 tips and 6 little preparation tips, I would strongly recommend practicing the interview. So do some mock interviews. If you subscribe to the idea of preparing a little bit, which I highly recommend, by the way, I strongly discourage trying to wing your PhD interview unless, that's a strategy that has worked well with you and you think better on your feet. In general, PhD interviews can feel kind of scary. You are asked some very specific research-based questions, and they also are pretty high in stakes, right? The stakes are high. If they've invited you for an interview, they're already taking you seriously as an applicant, but they're also taking other applicants equally seriously. So it's an opportunity for them to decide which applicants work best within our program and within the department that we have. And so you want to make sure that you are prepared. That's not to say that, go to the other extreme and write down every single thing that you could possibly want to say to them. I think there's a sweet spot where you can prepare just enough that you have valuable anchors in the process when, they're asking you questions. And then you can kind of weave between those anchors in a way that makes you seem really natural and effortless. At least I have found if I think really well when I'm in that sweet spot. So if I under prepare, don't prepare at all, or I over prepare, I find it harder to think on my feet. But if I have these few key bullet points, it helps me address the questions that I prepared for, but it also helps me answer questions that I didn't prepare for. It helps me better to think on my feet. Because it feels like, my brain's in motion. It's already doing the thing it needs to do. And so walling back one of the questions that you didn't prepare for feels easier when I have this kind of sweet spot of preparation. So I would recommend that you do some mock interviews. And for those, based on the little list of tips I've provided, write little bullet points for each of the answer and then just say them out loud a couple times and practice it enough so that it starts to feel natural and effortless, right? So it doesn't feel like you are trying to recall something or memorize something. It just feels like you are saying things that are coming to you in the moment. And it'll help you feel really comfortable and ready, but it will also make you seem really prepared and kind of effortlessly prepared. So I recommend doing some mock interviews. All right, so there we have it. 6 concrete tips to help you excel in your PhD interviews. Remember, the goal behind all of this preparation is not to build some kind of artificial persona or facade to just impress the interviewer or the panel of interviewers. The goal behind all of this preparation is to express your genuine excitement and enthusiasm for the research you want to do, for the department and program you've applied for, and to do it in a way that makes you seem confident and articulate. PhD interviews are ultimately just conversations. And so you want to go into that conversation prepared, but you also want to have fun and you want to make sure that the people interviewing you have fun. So be prepared and then, just go and have fun. Thank you. That's it for today's video. I hope these tips help you shine in your PhD interviews. If you're curious about any aspect of this academic journey more, you want to understand what to think about, if you want to do a PhD or apply for a master's program, what kinds of material you need, how they should be prepared, take a look at my website and the resources available on it. If you have ideas for things you would like me to cover in future videos, please mention that in the comments below. Like this video, share it, please subscribe. I will aim to release a video every Wednesday covering some aspect of the academic application process. All right, until next time, good luck with your academic adventures. Bye.